Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the stories by our military veterans. Get yourself ready. It's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast that gives a voice to our veterans. On today's episode, we're going to be having a fireside chat with Navy Chaplain Scott Dean. So he's going to get on here, tell us a little bit about the chaplaincy corps, and then just some other things for the veterans that happen to be listening as well. But before we get into that, if you want to help our cause here and getting our voices out to the masses, be sure to go to our website. We have a patron link. You can click on that. That's a reoccurring monthly donation. But if you don't want to do a reoccurring donation, you can scroll down. There is a link in there that you can give a one-time donation. Anything that you give is much appreciated in helping us through this podcast. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, I had to get that out for a second. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, be sure to email me at thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. Again, that's thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. All right, without further ado, Chaplain Scott Dean, how are you doing today?
Good, Master Guns. It's a beautiful day.
It is.
I'm glad to be here. Yeah,
it is a beautiful day. I gotta say, I was kind of thinking to myself, should I even bring this up? But I affectionately call you Lazarus Chaps, and but that's just our little nickname that we have for you. But yeah, I'm excited that you're here. How about we start the discussion? Maybe start with what is the chaplaincy corps and what exactly does that do, and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Navy Chaplain Corps, we cite our birth date as 1775. Revolutionary War, George Washington commissioned ministers to ride ships. And so, those early days of privateers being, conscripted and joining the Navy in the fight against the British.
Right.
We had, Marines, of course, manning the sails and the lines. And, there was just clergy that heard the call to support citizens by riding on ships. And so you would have a Methodist pastor that would be riding a ship and taking care of the spiritual needs of the crew and sometimes teaching them math and English and how to read and write while holding worship services. Ever since then, it kind of grew through all the major wars that we've been in. The Chaplain Corps has grown. At first, for a long time, it was just religious professionals typically getting sent by their home churches to go serve, not collecting a government paycheck. But eventually, chaplains became commissioned officers and started serving. And it's kind of evolved since then. Nowadays, you could say that the Chaplain Corps' mission is the spiritual readiness of Marines, sailors, Coast Guards people, and merchant mariners. And we do that through a lot of different ways. We do that through embedded support by getting attached to a destroyer or an aircraft carrier or a Marine battalion. And we are doing the deployments. We're enduring the hardships. We're embracing the suck there with our people and trying to make sure that the warrior spirit of our men and women who serve in the military is cared for. In some ways, you could say that we kind of operate as a moral compass because we try to give sound advice to the commanding officer and to the triad about how the morale of the crew is, if we see any ethical breaches.
Right.
We also do a lot of, besides our normal religious professional duties
Mhm.
of doing worship services, sacraments, baptisms,
Right.
weddings, pastoral counseling. We also do a lot of training. We've tried to broaden our our reach, if you will, because I'll be honest, not a whole lot of service members come up to me and say, Chaps, I really got an issue with Paul's letter to the Ephesians. I'm struggling with his concept of grace.
Right.
It's usually
Yeah.
not theological issues that people come to chaplains for
Right.
because we have 100% confidentiality. A service member might come to us and just say, I'm really having some dark thoughts, chaps, and I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of training for suicide intervention and prevention, and we partner with Navy medicine and
Mhm.
psychologists and clinical social workers to make sure that the minds and the hearts and the spirits of service members and their families are taken care of.
Yeah, that's awesome. As my dealings with the chaplain course, so you specifically here at the School of Music where I was at last year, as a senior enlisted, I always had a lot of Marines coming in, going out, and maybe needing somebody just to talk to, those types of things, like you were mentioning. And I know you did a fantastic job. We called it doing drive-bys. So we'd point somebody out and you'd kind of just happen to go see that individual and just ask how things are going, which turned out to be fantastic for us and getting those students where they needed to be and the help that they needed along the way. So I think that was an awesome thing that you did for us there at the Marine Detachment.
No, thanks, Master Guns. Yeah, it was. It's funny. We all take hits, right?
Mhm.
When you do, whether it's 4 years or 24 years in the military, there's going to be times when professionally, personally, relationally, financially, something happens,
Mhm.
and it can sometimes spiral, and this is where having somebody who cares comes alongside of you and just, sometimes it's just a heartfelt conversation over a cup of coffee that can
Right.
help give somebody perspective. Because, and let's face it, when we go through stuff, it's really easy to get tunnel vision and to
Mhm.
get locked into that set of problems that we're dealing with and just feel overwhelmed. And
Right.
that's where I think, yeah, I think chaplains can just do a lot of good. Is just be normal human beings, be approachable,
Right.
have that conversation, and make somebody feel seen and heard for what they're going through.
Yeah, and I'm sure every service member at some point in time has had their dealings with the chaplains and has seen what the chaplains that can actually do for them, which is extensive. And you talk about the training, doing the different like suicide prevention, those types of things.
Mm.
In my opinion, those things are huge. How often do you deal with veterans and those types of things as a active duty chaplain?
You know, Sadly, I haven't had as much dealing. I'm in a doctoral program right now at Vanderbilt, and I'm working with military chaplains and VA chaplains, and I'm consistently impressed with what our VA chaplains do. A lot of them are priors, so they had some service. In fact, uh, two of the ones in my small group served in the Navy, but they bring a lot to the table.
Right.
Typically, as an active duty chaplain, we do take care of veterans, and I have had interaction, especially being a base chaplain, where
Mhm.
a veteran would walk into the chapel and just say, "Hey, chaps, wanted to get married on Fort Story in 6 months. Can you do that?" And I'd say, "Sure." Or they'd
Yeah.
say, "Hey, I'm in a tough place. Can we grab a cup of coffee and talk?" And I'd say, "Absolutely." Um, it is tough though, because veterans, I would say, uh, not all veterans use the VA.
Mhm.
And the VA, I think, has made a lot of changes in the last few years. There was
Yeah.
a period where uh, veterans were suiciding in parking lots of VA hospitals because of their frustration at the system not working and just feeling like their needs were not being met.
Right.
And I from what I've seen on my end and in conversations with cohorts in the VA has worked really hard to change that. And what I'm impressed with VA chaplains, if any of your listeners are considering using the VA, is that VA chaplains, almost more so than military chaplains, are really good at interdisciplinary team conversations. So
Okay.
they'll have a regular relationship with the psychologist and the clinical social worker and the nurse practitioner, where if a veteran is needing extensive care, sometimes some of our veterans are struggling with serious mental illness, substance
Right.
abuse, housing issues. Chaplains will hop onto a team to
Right.
care for that veteran, and they do it well. They know how to speak the collaborative language, and they do an excellent job of making sure those needs are met.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That I didn't realize that the chaplains in the VA worked with a team like that, or at least as closely with a team, and that's a fantastic thing. And I would say the active duty side does that as well. Correct?
For sure, yeah. Some communities have more resources available. When I worked with Naval Special Warfare, you had all of the best players in
Right.
place. So you had hard charging operational psychologists, and you had nutritionists, and you had clinical
Hmm.
social workers that offered really great psychotherapeutic modalities, and we had a seat at the table. So it does happen in military communities. I would say that VA chaplains probably have a little bit more experience just because of their institutional chaplaincy background and the certifications that they require.
Right.
But yeah, it happens all over.
That's awesome. Now, what types of things do you feel that veterans could assist our chaplains, both active duty and at the VA? Like, what are some things that if they wanted to go and help or do something for you guys, what types of things would you need?
I'm glad you asked that. And it's funny. I've got a dear friend. She was a command master chief. Um, remarkable, one of the best leaders I've ever worked with in the Navy. And I've been in 22 years, so I've seen a lot of leaders. And once she retired from 30 years of active duty service, she ended up, um, both her and her husband are retired master chiefs, so they
Oh,
didn't
wow.
have to work. But Nancy decided that she wanted to give back, so she started working on a counseling degree.
Mm,
And she would go to the local VA in Tennessee, and she would just volunteer to sit in on support groups.
right.
And, I think that her willingness to continue to serve
Hmm.
veterans has just led her on this journey of um, looking for meaning and purpose and a sense of uh, good work to do in this season
Right.
of life. But I say no matter what, I know some people serve in the American Legion, some people, um, what's the Marine Corps? Is it the Marine Corps League?
Marine Corps League. That's right. Yeah.
Yep. Um, some people go to VFWs. Some people are part of Irreverent Warriors. There's all
Hmm.
these different organizations that you can do as a veteran. I would just encourage people that continue to find ways to serve. For people that served in the military, they know what it means to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
Hmm.
Two of the things that psychologists found that are the biggest factors in resiliency to depression are gratitude and serving others.
Wow.
So I would just encourage, the people that listen to this podcast, if you're a veteran, you got out, maybe you're feeling some disconnection because the camaraderie in the civilian sector is not the same. You miss, that connection, that cohesion, that serving. Find ways in your local community to continue to serve. Sometimes it's just nice to just go to a VA. I know one of my Navy chaplain friends, she goes to the new VA center in Virginia Beach.
Right.
And she'll just go around and talk to some of the vets there and just have conversations with them because they have a lot to share. They've got war stories, they've got
Yeah.
unique things from their time in uniform, that'll leave both of you laughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they've got sea stories to, I'm
Absolutely.
just like your book, you've got
Yeah.
stuff to share that people would just benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's been fantastic that I've found with this podcast so far is veterans that get on here. They tend to open up a little bit and share some things that even family members hadn't heard and stuff like that, which is fantastic. And it's really one of the reasons. Like I thought about my dad as he was growing up. He wasn't able, like, well, I guess he didn't feel comfortable sharing some of that stuff, but he would get around other veterans and they would be able to open up. So this is kind of the same thing, but it's recorded and family members can go and listen to it and stuff and hear some of those stories. So it's been really cool from that standpoint for sure.
Yeah, and it's powerful. I think there's something that happens within us when we tell our stories. It's almost like by retelling those stories, it helps us to process them, maybe to
Yeah.
heal from them. Um, but those stories of service, you know, they've become a part of who we are.
Hmm.
And there's that knowing,
Yeah.
when you see another veteran, um, and you see a pin because you or a ribbon that
Right.
shows where they served, and you're like, yep. Where were you at in Afghanistan? Or
Yeah.
what year did you go through airborne, sir? And then the
Yeah,
stories
exactly.
just unfold, and that's
It's
great. Yeah.
it's definitely a unique type of thing with veterans and anybody that served. It's just it's a camaraderie that you don't always have, especially for a lot of veterans that got out, like you said, and that they don't feel that connection anymore. Uh, and you're saying go to different organizations, become a part of it, Marine Corps League, VFW, those types of things. And their organizations are wanting people to come in and help because they are still out in the community serving the community. They're serving the active duty component.
So,
They're doing all those things. So encouraging veterans to get out, that's a fantastic thing.
oh, absolutely. I think there's a great book called Tribe by Sebastian Younger. I'm sure some
Yeah.
of your listeners have read the book. But he just writes about how so many service members came back from those 20 years of war in the Middle East, and they missed it.
Hmm.
And when Sebastian Younger was asking the question, like, why would you miss constantly putting your life on the line, you know, eating
Hmm.
MREs and fobs, what he came to find was that what they missed was having an identity and being a part of a tribe.
Right.
So to veterans, I think the challenge to you is, how are you finding your new tribe,
Right.
and how's that going? And if you need help, you know, reach out because there's resources for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say if veterans, like if they're close to military installations, those types of things, I know you guys have church and you have, whether it's, Christian or whether it's something else, but you have plenty of services that they could go to and be a part of with the active duty component as they go to church there as well, which that is a tribe, right? Your faith community is a huge tribe as well, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do. Um, it's just finding some way to remain connected, because for most of us, we started serving in the military at a very pivotal point in our lives, that sort of coming
Right.
of age time. Although I came in a little bit later, I was 25 when I joined, but that identity, uh, I love it when I meet somebody in like their 60s and they have like a Marine Corps sticker on the back of their truck, and you talk to them and they're like, I served 4 years, but it
Yeah.
became such a part of who they were,
Hmm.
and it formed them, and the values and the honor and the tradition that comes with serving in the Corps just
Yeah.
becomes a part of them. And you don't necessarily have to live near a base to get that experience, but you don't have to sit in a dusty VFW tall and drink, like crappy
Yeah.
beers to get that experience. It's just about finding it in some way, somehow.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
even J Rotzi or, who
True.
knows?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, us talk a little bit, just some of your history within the military. Like, where have you been? What are some of the things that you've done along the way?
Sure. Yeah. So I spent 11 years enlisted. I was a submariner, submariner, some people
Yeah.
say. I was a sonar technician and I worked on two different platforms. I was on fast attack
Hmm.
and boomers. So fast attack submarines are the ones that sort of the hunter killers. We go into enemy territory, we track warships, and we get sound cuts and, provide intel to keep our nation and allies safe.
Right.
So I did that for the majority of my time in submarines, and I also worked in strategic deterrence. So that's the boomers, the ballistic missile submarines that just
Hmm.
kind of float around 3 knots to nowhere, and we've
Right.
carry a nuclear payload um, to help keep our country safe.
Hmm.
So I did that for 11 years, and it was a great experience. Met some of the best friends, guys that I could call up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, "No questions asked. I need $500." They'd say, "We got you."
Very
We
nice.
all need
Right.
people like that. Yeah. Um, but interestingly enough, probably about 8 years into my career, um, there was a Navy chaplain that
Mhm.
worked at the submarine school in Groton, where I was serving as an A school instructor, MOS
Right.
instructor, and she came up to me one day at the end of a retirement ceremony for a fellow first class, and she comes up to me and she says, "Petty Officer Dean, have you ever thought about being a Navy chaplain? I think you should
Wow.
go home and pray about it." She explained that some of my students had talked to her about the way that I tried to take care of them, and I saw my job as an instructor for first to second sailors as being much more than just teaching them knowledge, skills, and abilities to be a good sonar technician on a submarine. I took an interest in their personal lives. I made sure that they were cared for, um, and I guess it got to her, and she's an '06, so
Hmm.
of course I was at attention listening to her and took to heart everything that she said. But I just the sense that I really needed to take a moment to listen to this woman and what she had to share. What she did not know was that when I was a teenager growing up in a Methodist church, I had heard of calling into ministry, but for a number of different reasons, I ran from that calling. I ran from God. Part of my running was into the military.
Right.
Um, So at 8 years, I started praying about it, and I certainly was not a saint. I'd made a lot of mistakes
Hmm.
in my personal life was not perfect, and I started to get the sense that God was calling me to take care of people. And I'd already been working on a degree in psychology. I knew I was probably not born to be a technician and troubleshoot Linux servers. That's just not my wiring. I've never been
Right.
great with the technical side. So I knew I was moving towards a direction of taking care of people, but wasn't sure exactly what that was going to look like. And it her that conversation with her started a 4 year journey where I changed my master's focus and I went to seminary and eventually became a Navy chaplain. And it's been an adventure since then. I've been doing that for 10 years and I've gotten to serve the surface force, naval aviation, installation commands, naval special warfare, and now this summer I'm going to work with the Marines. It's just been fun.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about being a chaplain is you get to um, try these different communities in the military on for
Right.
size and say, hey, that was fun. I've never done an emergency blow before on a submarine. What is Army Airborne School like? And let's go
Right.
try that out. And so that's what it's like to go fly on an MH-53.
Right. Yeah.
And you just get this sense that we have a great country, and we have this great group of human beings that serve day in and day out on
Hmm.
all different platforms and all different places. And they're people that you and I probably would have never met if
Hmm.
we never joined.
Very true.
We would have just went about our lives in this small, places where we grew up or that we moved to. But you get to meet these incredible humans with all kinds of stories and all kinds of reasons for serving. And, I on a regular basis, I get inspired by the people that I meet and serve with.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will tell you, just from my time serving with you, I had a blast. I appreciated you putting up with kind of our shenanigans from time to time. But it was incredibly helpful to have that chaplain ready and willing. Which there are times where you're busy and oh man, but you were always there. You always answered the phone. You always had a reply, and you were there for the Marines whenever they needed it, and that was absolutely incredible. And across the board for the chaplaincies, all of them that I have served with, they've all been the same way. So whatever your schoolhouse is doing to train you guys, you're doing pretty good for yourselves.
Thanks, Pastor Guns. Oh no, you guys made it fun. It was so motivating. I wish I would have done more moto runs with you all, because anytime I was just feeling beat up or tired from, doing counselings that day or meetings, I'd come over to walk the hallways of your schoolhouse, and I just see these just motivated students and staff. Hey, chaps, good morning, sir. And then,
Right.
just the excitement that people brought. And, even for the Marines that were going through a tough time that I would sit and talk to in my office, it I was also inspired because they wanted to deal with their problems. They wanted to
Mhm.
overcome them so that they could be better Marines, so that they could be better students, so they could
Right.
get to the fleet and do their mission. So no, it was inspiring. I mean, you guys were definitely a ray of sunshine during those 3 years at Little
Yeah.
Creek.
Yeah. It was a good time for me for sure. So what advice would you have as far as getting veterans getting involved? Like we were talking about earlier, what is probably the number one key thing that you would hone in on to try and get them involved in those different communities?
Yeah, good point, or good question. It's funny. I'm reading this book, actually, conveniently, it's right here. It's called Ikigai.
Okay.
And Ikigai is this concept in Japan. Okinawa has some of the highest or the longest living human beings in the
Mhm.
world. So in one Okinawan village, there is the largest amount of people over 100 years old in this village.
Wow.
And this in this book, they interview a lot of uh, these people, and they explain that in Japan they don't really have a word for retire like we do
Hmm.
here in the West. Meaning that even if they finish working their job, they never see themselves as retired.
Right.
And so I would just love to challenge your listeners and say, just because your time in uniform ended doesn't mean that you don't have something important to do.
Hmm.
There are so many service members and even recent veterans that could benefit from a mentoring relationship from a veteran that's maybe been out for a minute, that's
Hmm.
found their footing. Um, I 2 years ago I attended we had this DoD VA suicide prevention conference that we do every year, and we
Right.
bring all the latest scientists, researchers, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists to bear on this problem of veteran and service member suicide. And one of the things that they said is the year before and year after people get out are some of the most critical times.
Mm.
So I would challenge your people listening that if you're a veteran and you've maybe struggled through that, find somebody that you can help
Right.
to help normalize some of those things. Because for a lot of people, it's almost like learning a foreign language
Hmm.
moving to the civilian sector. Because if you came in when you were 18, this is all you've known,
Yeah.
this military culture for 20 plus years.
Hmm.
And you get out and you move back to your hometown, or you take a job in a different city, and it can feel like you moved to a different country in some ways because you're not wearing a uniform.
Right.
Let's face it, people uh, in the civilian corporate world don't have that sense of respect up and down the chain of command,
Very true. Yeah.
don't carry themselves with the sort of same professionalism that a lot
Hmm.
of people in uniform do. So I would just encourage uh, your listeners, find somebody to mentor, and you could maybe do that through the VA. Um, Maybe it's through the VFW, Navy League,
Right.
Marine Corps League, because your service isn't done. And kind of along with that, I would say because of your service, you've learned things, you've experienced things that will benefit your community.
Hmm.
You look at cultures throughout the ages, and Native American cultures would
Hmm.
oftentimes have ceremonies around warriors coming back from war to sort of prepare them for life back in the tribe,
Right.
in the
Yeah.
village. At the end of World War II, Japanese towns, the elders would get together and they would greet the service members coming back, the men coming
Hmm.
back from war. And they would oftentimes hold ceremonies to say, we honor what you did for our country. Now it's time for you to serve your communities, to get your
Right.
country back in the green, to help your country recover. We don't do that. We
Yeah.
don't.
That's
Some
true.
people have a retirement ceremony. Some people just get a DD 214 and a thanks a lot, a yellow sticky of appreciation. But yeah, I say that because we don't have ceremonies like that in our culture. But what we do need is people that transition well
Hmm.
and that bring those experiences, bring that character, bring those leadership skills to their community.
Hmm.
And so if they get out and they become a teacher at a local elementary school, you're going to stand out
Very
because you
true.
carry yourself in a way that your peers, they didn't have those experiences that you did. They weren't tested like you were.
Right.
So bring, it's even if it's not mentoring a veteran, it's making your community better. If you're coaching a high school football team,
Hmm.
what are some of the lessons that you learned from your military experience, maybe from command PT or whatnot,
Right.
that you can instill in those young kids? I would just say, just look for ways that to continue to serve with ways that fit for your personality, because
Hmm.
everybody's kind of wired differently. Everybody has their own passions. I know one veteran I talked to, and this is kind of in line with what you love. He got into fly fishing,
Yeah.
and fly fishing just works because it's sort of this meditative,
That's true.
healing activity that gets him out of his head. Another one of my friends, a retired SEAL, he works with equine therapy now,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
he helps other veterans process their combat trauma through working with horses. And they do these amazing, it's called Heroes to Horses, and they do these
Hmm.
amazing horse excursions, and they travel and they process their pain together. So I would just say, just find something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I would say it's a sense of belonging, and in order to belong to something, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Just like when you joined the military, it was outside of our comfort zone. Nobody was prepared as mentally as they should have been whenever they joined. So you have to get out of that comfort zone and go find somebody. And I think that's a very good point. But even if it's just helping your community, like you were saying, helping clean up the park, or I don't know, there's probably a million different things you could do within your own community. But yeah, those are definitely some good key points to bring out. I appreciate it.
Preach, Master Guns. Yeah, get out of that comfort zone. And I think that's one of the ways that we stay young when we get older is we're lifelong learners and we're always curious.
Mm-hmm.
Is you learn a lot from conversations. You learn a lot from getting out of your comfort zone and talking to people that you wouldn't normally talk to. And you're right, there's something magical that happens when we serve others, whether it's every Comrel, is community relations. It's a bread and butter as a chaplain corps.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember I had the privilege of doing community service events all across the Pacific and Indian Ocean when I was attached to my first unit as a chaplain. But the look of joy and selflessness that I
Mm-hmm.
would see in my sailors when they were doing a community service event, whether it was cleaning up an orphanage in the Philippines or going to teach English at a language school in Bahrain. Those are just great experiences, and we can do that here on American soil
Yeah.
just as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, is there anything before we start wrapping this up? Is there anything that you want to leave for the listeners? You just want to tell a good sea story or anything of that nature before we go ahead and wrap things up here?
Ah, yeah, probably should have thought about this ahead of time.
I'm putting you on the spot here with the sea story.
No, yeah, you're good. Let me think about this for a second. Oh, gosh, it's funny. I think back over 22 years, and it feels like time flew by in some
Yeah.
ways. I know, on deployments, sometimes the time drags out. But
Right.
all right, I'll share this story. This is a
Okay.
story from my enlisted days. But definitely gave me a sense of how we as a military all work together, even though
Mm-hmm.
we work on all these different communities and different platforms. So it was Thanksgiving Day, 2004,
Okay.
and my submarine was off the coast of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we were working with the George Washington Strike Group, so the carrier strike group. So
Right.
USS George Washington, CVN 73, and then you had all these destroyers, and you had all these different warships, and we were playing the enemy submarine.
Okay.
And so they were preparing for deployment, and what they would do if, say an enemy submarine came up. So we had all these different exercises that we were doing, and there were helicopters were deploying and dropping sonar buoys, trying to track us down as all
Right.
part of this, surface action group exercises. Well, after watch, I stood watch in the sonar shack for 6 hours, and as I was getting off watch, I was going to the mess decks because I wanted my turkey dinner.
Right.
I ended up we were at periscope depth and we were rocking back and forth. I ended up slipping down the stairs and cracking my head open
Oh no.
on the submarine. Yeah, I collapsed at the bottom of machinery two, and my buddy TM2 Rush ran up to me. He's like, "Dude, are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, just get me to my turkey dinner." And I turn my head, and my ear is hanging by a thread of skin. It's just like this,
Wow.
and he grabs my ear, and he can see daylight through the ear. It's just being held on by two little flaps of skin,
Oh my
and he's
gosh.
like, "Dude, we need to get you to dock." And on a submarine, submarines are anywhere between 110 and 130 humans. It's
Yeah.
small,
Right.
and we don't have a Navy doctor. We have a corpsman,
Mm-hmm.
and from the Marine time, like
That's right.
corpsmen are like these exceptional creatures that know how to take out a spleen, on a table and do a tracheotomy. Navy
Right.
corpsmen are just they do so much good. And so my corpsman, I'll never forget, Senior Chief Kevin Boyce. He went on to be a Master Chief and was awesome, but he took one look at my ear and knew exactly what to do. He ended up putting my head down on the wardroom table and putting 27 stitches in my
Wow.
ear because he had to join the cartilage together and
Yeah.
the skin on the back of the ear and the skin on the front of the ear. Um, I mean, he'd served a whole bunch of time with the Marines, so he had
Right.
all this combat experience, knew how
Uh-huh.
to do field medicine. Um, but he advised the commanding officer that we kind of had to stop our exercises and get me off to get seen by the Navy doctors on the carrier, just because of concussion protocol and
Mm-hmm.
concerns with the head trauma. So CO listened to his doc, and the
Right.
next day they did a small boat transfer. So there was a rigid inflatable boat, a rib that came
Mm-hmm.
up to the submarine. And that's a dangerous evolution of itself,
Yeah.
getting somebody off the submarine onto this, rib. The rib brought me to a destroyer, and I got taken up, the Jacob's ladder up the destroyer, got seen by the corpsman on the destroyer, and then they heloed me over to
Wow.
the carrier, and I got seen by the doctors there, and they were like, "Who did your stitches? They're amazing." And I was like, "That's my corpsman, Senior Chief Boyce." They were just so impressed. But I stayed on the carrier for a few days while they made sure that everything was healing up nicely. And then I
Mhm.
got catapulted off of the carrier on one of those mail planes on a Greyhound
Wow.
and went to NAS Jax. But here I am, this non-useful body, which is what we
Uh-huh.
call submariners that are not qualified yet on the ship.
Right.
E3 STSSN Dean, having this incredible adventure, and the only price was one partially ripped off ear.
One partially ripped off here. I have probably the most important question in that whole
Yeah.
thing. Did you get any turkey?
Yes. Yes, I
Okay,
did.
good,
It,
good.
it, but I don't remember much of it, probably because of the trauma.
At least you got turkey, so that's a positive.
Yeah. Thanksgiving had a happy ending after all.
Hey, chaps, thanks for coming on and doing this podcast for me. It means the world to me that you came on to do this and talk a little bit about the chaplaincy corps. Uh, you're doing great things. You're going to go back and working with the Marines, and so it's going to be a good thing for you. But thanks again. I appreciate you coming on.
No, I love what you do, and I'm grateful for you putting this out because people need this. They
Yeah.
absolutely do. And it's been an honor serving with you. And looking forward to your retirement coming up soon.
I know it's what, like a week away, but I got to shave all this off so I don't look so nasty whenever I get retired. So, but
It'll
yeah,
grow back.
and thank you for also coming to the retirement and doing the prayer and all that type of stuff. It means a lot to me.
No, it'll be a ceremony to remember.
Absolutely, heck yeah. All right, to all the veterans out there, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Hopefully, you got something good from the chaplain today. If you are having problems, you're having issues, and you need some help, the VA has a wonderful website. It's veteranscrisisline.net. Again, that's veteranscrisisline.net. You could always pick up the phone, dial 988, and press option 1. They'll be able to get you to somebody fairly quickly and get you taken care of with whatever it is that you may need. You can also text. So there's 838-255. Again, that's 838-255. So there's also an option online where you can chat online. I know the younger generation likes to do that, but you can go to the veteranscrisisline.net. Once you get on there, there's a chat icon. Just click on that. You can type away, and somebody will be there to answer whatever questions or give you whatever help that you need. But one veteran's life lost is one too many. So I know from me, I'm going to tell you that you matter. And I know that the chaplain would say the same thing. You matter. Just reach out to somebody and get some help. All right. With that, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Stay motivated. Change your socks.